Hey everyone, today I'm back in Lost Ark because I want to talk a bit about Striker, as I've been experimenting with the class a little bit over the last few weeks. Now, I've been playing Striker since the launch of the game essentially. It's always been part of my main roster, and more recently I decided to get him ready for the upcoming Belshazzar release so that he can farm the new materials and maybe also do Gate 1 and Gate 2 of the new Legion raid. However, item level alone wasn't really going to do it for me. I also needed to upgrade his engravings, and it's at that point that I decided to play around with builds a little bit. Ever since I started playing Striker, I've always played the same build, swiftness based esoteric flurry. Sure, it went through some minor changes as I was going from tier 1 to tier 3, because I got more and better wealth runes, more stats, and then also more tripod levels, but ever since I hit somewhere around 1370 a month or so after release, he's always been on the same build, which was 500 spec, 500 crit, 1000 swiftness, 4 spender esoteric flurry. And that build was very fun, and it's also the one that I would recommend to any new Striker players because it's a very comfortable build and it also feels really good to play. At least to me, most swiftness based builds feel pretty good, especially when you're playing without a yearning support, which you will probably never play with until you start doing hard mode, Legion raids and other stuff around that item level. And Deathblow is also a build that requires a lot of investment. You need high spec, you need your tripod levels as well, and you need your wealth runes. So before you can get to that point, definitely recommend people to play Esoteric Flurry. However, Deathflow is the more popular endgame build, and I never really gave it a real shot, so I decided to go and give it a try. At first, I made a somewhat budget build that would still allow me to switch back to Esoteric Flurry without too much investment if I didn't end up liking Deathblow, but after playing around with it for a little bit, I can certainly see why it's such a popular build. So I made a proper 5 engraving build for Deathblow that I was planning to use going into Belshazzar content. But, as fate would have it, just as I finished my Deathblow build, I came across a YouTube video of a full spec 0 swiftness esoteric build that used 5 spenders. And of course my curiosity was piqued, so I had to go and give it a try. In Trixion, the build didn't really perform that much worse than what I had on my Deathblow build, and because it was pretty fun, I decided to see how much it would actually cost me to make it into an actual thing that I could take into raids without people just not accepting me, because we all know how much people like to complain about gatekeeping in this game, and if you're playing something that is off meta, then the chances of being gatekept only go up. But with switching accessories and buying the esoteric engraving, it would only set me back around 20,000 gold. So I decided to just go for it, and well, it's been working pretty well for me so far. The only raid I haven't done on the build yet is Kakul Seidon, which hopefully I'll be able to do that tonight, but it felt pretty good to play in both Valtan and Vicus, and I was also able to get Cruel Fighter on all of the gates, so the build certainly does do damage. It's just a bit different from the standard meta builds, but different doesn't necessarily mean bad. In this game, as long as you play well, you can make most builds work as long as they make sense. So what makes this build fun? Well, it's sort of a hybrid between Esoteric Flurry and Deathblow. Esoteric I know as the fast build where you just spam away at your spenders, and Deathblow is the slow hard-hitting build. Now this one is a mix of both. You're a bit slower than the normal esoteric build because, well, you have 0 swiftness, but you do have 2 attack speed steroids from tripods. So it feels a lot smoother than Deathblow because you have these attack speed buffs, and while you might not be hitting as hard as you would with Deathblow, you still hit some really nice numbers. So it's a middle ground between both builds. Now the 5th spender, while it might not really do much damage compared to the other 4, is a fairly nice skill for what it offers. It's the second counter, which is nice because you'll be using your main counter to generate gauge quite often, and it also provides level 2 weak point. Now the weak point is kind of whatever in most content, but for Valtan and Kungalenium for example, it can be quite nice to break the armor faster, because Striker doesn't really have much when it comes down to weak point skills, so it's quite nice. And it's also the second skill that provides you with an attack speed and movement speed buff for a few seconds. So you can use this to set up your Lightning Tiger Strike or other slow skills, and it's the reason why even though you're going 0 swiftness, the build feels kind of smooth to play because you pretty much have a full uptime on an attack speed and a movement speed buff. So it certainly does work together quite well with the rest of the build. So overall the build itself has been pretty fun to play, and it's just something different that still performs pretty well, and I'm just looking forward to having a bit more fun with this. I'll probably end up switching between this build and the standard meta Deathblow build just to mix things up a little bit, and then I'll see if I want to stick to one build over the other. But for now I'm just going to be playing around with both builds just to have some fun, and then I'll go from there. So if you feel like the normal esoteric build doesn't hit hard enough, or the Deathblow build is a bit too slow for you, then maybe you can give this one a try. It's a good middle ground between both builds, as it still provides some nice numbers to look at and it's not as slow as Deathblow. And I think that pretty much sums up everything that I wanted to talk about, so I want to thank you for watching, I want to thank my Patreons for their support, and I'll see you in the next one.